Chapter 1: First Contact, Second Thoughts, and Third Pheromones. The crimson sun dipped below the horizon of Kepler 186f, painting the alien sky in hues of amethyst and burnt orange. Amelia Hernandez, her face smudged with Keplerian mud and a triumphant grin plastered across her lips, held aloft a vibrant, bioluminescent flower. "Eureka!" she exclaimed, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous research greenhouse. "I've cracked the photosynthesis cycle. This beauty generates its own light using a completely novel process." A low hum, almost subsonic, vibrated through the greenhouse floor. Amelia frowned. "Seismic activity?" "Not again," she muttered, checking her seismograph readings. The readings were unusual. More like a purr? Suddenly, a shimmering blue form materialized in the middle of the greenhouse. It stood bipedally, about Amelia's height, with fur the color of a twilight sky, large, expressive eyes that glowed with an inner light, and paws that subtly twitched. Its tail, long and sinuous, swished gently. Amelia stared, jaw slack. This was not on the mission brief. "Hello," she squeaked, feeling remarkably underdressed in her mud-splattered overalls. The creature tilted its head, a soft, inquisitive sound emanating from what Amelia assumed was its mouth. It emitted a series of clicks and whistles, a sound that was somehow both musical and oddly unnerving. "Right, well, this is unexpected," Amelia said, trying to maintain a professional demeanor while internally panicking. "I'm Dr. Hernandez." "And you are?" The creature responded with more clicks and whistles, punctuated by a low, rumbling purr that seemed to vibrate Amelia's very bones. Then, it extended a paw, revealing retractable claws that shimmered with an ethereal light. Amelia cautiously extended her hand. The creature's paw was surprisingly soft, warm, and surprisingly large. She felt a sudden jolt, a warmth that spread through her from her fingertips to, well, everywhere. "Whoa," she breathed, her cheeks flushing a delicate shade of pink. This was definitely not in the training manual on first contact protocols. The creature, Amelia was starting to think it was a bit of an understatement, let out a series of increasingly intense whistles, its blue fur deepening in color. Its eyes, already luminous, seemed to blaze. The rumbling purr escalated to a low growl, the greenhouse vibrating noticeably now. Amelia had a sudden, unsettling feeling that things were about to get very interesting, and possibly very complicated. "I think," Amelia said, backing away slowly, "I think your hellos might be a bit intense." The scent in the air, previously dominated by the sweet floral aroma of the bioluminescent flower, was now overtaken by something musky, rich, and undeniably alluring. Something that made her feel strangely receptive. "Okay, maybe our intense is an understatement," she added, her voice trembling slightly as the rumbling escalated into a full-blown, greenhouse-shaking roar, accompanied by a cascade of sparks from the creature's fur. "This is way beyond intense. She glanced around frantically. "Anyone else getting the sudden urge to, mate with a giant, luminous cat thing?" Silence. Only the creature's increasingly frenzied humming and the throbbing in her own temples answered her. Amelia sighed. This was going to be a long mission. A very, very long and potentially furry mission. Chapter 2: Bioluminescence and Blunders. The next morning dawned with the research station in a state of utter chaos. Xylo, Amelia had tentatively settled on that name after deciphering some of his more melodic chirps, was radiating an almost unbearable intensity. His fur pulsed with a vibrant, almost painful blue, his eyes glowed like twin supernovae, and the air throbbed with pheromones that felt like a physical force. Amelia, clad in a biohazard suit, mostly to protect herself from the pheromone onslaught, cautiously entered the greenhouse. Xylo was engaged in a bizarre ritual, pacing back and forth, emitting a series of high-pitched whistles that set her teeth on edge. He occasionally leaped onto precarious stacks of experimental equipment, causing small avalanches of soil and test tubes. "Right, this is not good," Amelia muttered to herself, grabbing her data pad. According to preliminary scans, his bioluminescence correlates directly with emotional intensity. Suddenly, Xylo stopped pacing and stared directly at her. His fur pulsed even brighter, almost blindingly so. He let out a series of increasingly frantic chirps, punctuated by a guttural growl that sounded suspiciously like frustrated yearning. "Okay, I'm getting the vibe," Amelia said, taking a step back. "You're feeling passionate? About something? Possibly me?" She winced. "That came out wrong." Xylo responded with a series of clicks that, after several minutes of intense concentration and cross-referencing with her newly created Xylo's human translator app, Amelia hesitantly translated to, impending planetary alignment disrupting normal mating cycles. "Must mate. Now." Amelia blinked. "Planetary alignment? Seriously?" "Apparently so," Amelia said to Dr. Chen, the station's equally bewildered astrophysicist, later that day. Turns out, Xylo's mating cycles are synchronized with Kepler 186f's orbital patterns. And this particular alignment, well, let's just say it's making Xylo rather enthusiastic. Dr. Chen, a portly man whose usually calm demeanor was now replaced by a look of mild horror, adjusted his glasses. "And the pheromones?" Amelia shuddered. "Think of the most potent aphrodisiac you can imagine, then multiply it by 1,000. And add a dash of existential dread. Their attempts at mitigating the situation were, to put it mildly, disastrous. Attempts at distracting Xylo with advanced botanical specimens only seemed to fuel his passion. Playing soothing Xylo's mating call recordings from her data pad only intensified his already frantic behavior. Finally, in a moment of desperate inspiration, Amelia decided to try communicating through interpretive dance. She donned a sparkly jumpsuit, which seemed appropriate considering the circumstances, cranked up the Xylo's music, and proceeded to attempt a series of what she hoped were seductive, yet scientifically accurate, movements depicting the Keplerian planetary alignment. Xylo, meanwhile, stared at her with an expression that Amelia could only describe as a mix of utter bewilderment and burgeoning arousal. His bioluminescence pulsed rhythmically, in sync with, well, Amelia wasn't sure what, but it certainly wasn't her elegant interpretation of celestial mechanics. The attempts at communication only grew more hilariously inappropriate. The rest of the research crew, initially horrified, slowly found themselves succumbing to the absurdity of the situation and openly giggling as Amelia attempted to explain the complexities of astrophysics through interpretive dance. However, one thing was certain, things were about to get a whole lot weirder. Chapter 3, The Great Xylo's Mating Ritual, and Amelia's Unexpected Participation. Xylo's mating ritual, it turned out, was less a delicate dance and more a full-blown, bioluminescent rave. He transformed the greenhouse into a pulsating discotheque of blue light and chaotic energy. His fur shimmered with a dazzling array of colors, his purrs had escalated into a deep, resonating hum that threatened to shatter the glass, and his pheromones were now so potent Amelia felt like she was swimming in a sea of pure, intoxicating desire. The ritual involved a series of increasingly acrobatic leaps, spins, and displays of, well, Amelia wasn't entirely sure what to call them. They involved a lot of glowing, a lot of twitching, and a frankly alarming amount of claw sharpening on the greenhouse's surprisingly sturdy hydroponic troughs. "Okay," Amelia muttered, adjusting her biohazard suit for the 10th time that hour. "This is something." One particularly impressive leap involved Xylo scaling a 10-foot-tall experimental algae farm, only to launch himself across the greenhouse, landing with a graceful, albeit slightly earth-shattering, thump beside Amelia. He then proceeded to rub his head against her leg, emitting a low, throaty purr that sent shivers down her spine. It wasn't just the pheromones anymore, there was something undeniably intimate and adorable about this massive, glowing cat alien rubbing itself against her. "Right," Amelia said, trying to maintain a professional composure that was rapidly dissolving under the combined assault of pheromones, bioluminescent light show, and his surprisingly endearing behavior. "I think this rubbing is a sign of affection?" Xylo responded by emitting a series of clicks that Amelia, after several more minutes of frantic translating, interpreted as considerable affection. "Impending consummation?" Amelia choked on her own spit. "Consummation? With a space alien whose mating call sounded like a dying synthesizer?" She'd signed up for extraterrestrial botany, not interspecies romance, let alone interspecies romance involving a bioluminescent, pheromone-spewing, interpretive dance-resistant alien. Yet, the pheromones were doing a number on her logic circuits. The ritual escalated further. Xylo began weaving intricate patterns of bioluminescence, creating a breathtaking display of light and shadow. The pattern seemed to tell a story that Amelia, surprisingly, found herself understanding on a deeply emotional level. It was a story of longing, connection, and the overwhelming urge to, well, you know. In a moment of sheer, pheromone-induced bravery, or perhaps madness, Amelia reached out and touched Xylo's glowing fur. It was incredibly soft, like the finest silk, and vibrated gently under her fingertips. His purr intensified, and his eyes locked onto hers, a spark of something, understanding, passing between them. And then, things got even weirder. Xylo started incorporating Amelia into the ritual, gently nudging her into a series of increasingly intimate poses. It was less a mating dance and more a highly unusual, incredibly arousing interpretive dance lesson. By the time the orbital alignment reached its peak, and Xylo's bioluminescent display reached a fever pitch, Amelia found herself utterly captivated, utterly overwhelmed, and utterly unsure of what would happen next. One thing was certain, this was far from over. The accidental Xeno honeymoon was just beginning. Chapter 4: The Echoes of Understanding. The aftermath of the near-apocalyptic mating ritual was surprisingly calm. Xylo, having apparently expended a significant amount of energy, was curled up in a surprisingly neat pile of cushions in a corner of the greenhouse, emitting a contented purr that vibrated through the floor. Amelia, meanwhile, was nursing a throbbing head and a profound sense of bewilderment. "Okay," she muttered, rubbing her temples. That was intense. And yet, surprisingly fulfilling? She couldn't quite explain it, but the bizarre, bioluminescent mating ritual had somehow forged a connection between her and Xylo. It wasn't just the pheromones, though those certainly played a part, but something deeper, something communicative. That's when she discovered Xylo's secret weapon, echolocation. While cleaning up the post-ritual mess, which involved a significant amount of broken equipment and a surprisingly large quantity of oddly iridescent shed fur, Amelia noticed Xylo emitting a series of high-frequency clicks. These clicks weren't random, they seemed to be bouncing off objects, creating a sort of sonic map of the greenhouse. Amelia, being a scientist with a healthy dose of curiosity, started experimenting. She spoke, observing Xylo's reactions. She discovered that Xylo's echolocation wasn't just about spatial awareness, it was a sophisticated form of communication. He could perceive the subtle nuances of human speech, the tone, the inflection, the emotion, far better than her rudimentary translator app could. "So," Amelia said, cautiously testing the waters. "You understand me, even if you can't speak our language directly?" Xylo responded with a series of soft clicks, a low purr rumbling in his chest. The clicks, translated by her enhanced understanding, conveyed something akin to, precisely. "Your emotions are fascinatingly loud." Amelia laughed. Well, apologies for the emotional volcano that was the mating ritual. Turns out, intense was a significant understatement. Communication began to flow, albeit in a slightly unconventional manner. Amelia would speak, and Xylo would respond with a series of clicks, purrs, and subtle shifts in his bioluminescence, conveying a surprising depth of understanding and, occasionally, a healthy dose of dry wit. They spent the next few hours discussing everything from the intricacies of Kepler 186f's flora to the merits of various forms of interpretive dance. Amelia learned about Xylo's culture, their surprisingly sophisticated social structures, and their surprisingly tolerant views on interspecies relationships. Xylo, in turn, was fascinated by human history, particularly our tendency towards both spectacular achievements and spectacular self-destruction. "Your species," Xylo communicated through a series of clicks that translated roughly to, "is perplexing. Capable of incredible kindness and breathtaking cruelty." Fascinating. Amelia sighed. That's a pretty good summary of humanity, yes. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the greenhouse, Amelia felt a sense of connection she'd never experienced before. It was a connection built not on spoken words, but on shared experiences, mutual curiosity, and a healthy dose of shared awkwardness. The accidental Xeno honeymoon had taken an unexpected, and surprisingly rewarding, turn. The communication barrier was broken. The next challenge was navigating the social and perhaps biological complexities of their blossoming relationship. Chapter 5: The Jealous Biologist. The relative peace following Xylo's mating ritual didn't last. Dr. Albright, the station's lead xenobiologist and a man whose jealousy was as potent as Xylo's pheromones, decided to make his move. Albright had harbored a simmering resentment towards Amelia ever since she'd outshone him in securing the Kepler 186F mission. Now, seeing Amelia's unique bond with Xylo, his jealousy boiled over. Albright's plan, as it transpired, involved a complex scheme of scientific sabotage disguised as an act of altruism. He proposed a study of Xylo's pheromones, arguing that it was crucial for understanding Xylo's biology and ensuring the safety of the station crew. Amelia, ever the trusting scientist, initially agreed. "Good heavens, Amelia, you are far too trusting," Dr. Chen commented over a lukewarm cup of reconstituted coffee that morning. "That man is radiating negativity like a supernova radiating gamma rays." However, Amelia's intuition was stronger than her trust in Dr. Albright. During the study, she noticed subtle discrepancies in Albright's methods and equipment. He was using a frequency disruptor, subtly disguised as a pheromone analysis device, that was designed to interfere with Xylo's echolocation. The disruption was subtle at first, causing only minor communication hiccups between Amelia and Xylo. Xylo's usual soft purrs were replaced by frustrated growls, and his bioluminescence flickered erratically. He struggled to decipher Amelia's words, his usual easy rapport replaced with confusion and increasing anxiety. "Something's wrong," Xylo communicated through a series of anxious clicks, his fur shifting to a worried shade of teal. "The echoes, they are distorted." Amelia, her suspicions confirmed, decided to confront Albright. The confrontation took place in the dimly lit station laboratory, with Albright nervously adjusting his lab coat and Amelia radiating righteous fury. "Albright," Amelia said, her voice dangerously low. "I know what you're doing." Albright stammered, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. I was only trying to protect the station." "His pheromones are unstable." "His pheromones are perfectly stable," Amelia retorted, her eyes flashing. "And your study is nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to sabotage my work and destroy my connection with Xylo." "It's not just the pheromones," Xylo communicated through a low, intense hum that vibrated through the lab floor. "There is negativity, interference." Amelia's fury grew. She turned to the disruptor, a wicked grin spreading across her face. "Well, Albright," she purred, her voice laced with a dangerous sweetness, "let's see how your little experiment works out when it's turned against you." She expertly rewired the device, redirecting its frequency to disrupt Albright's own communication devices and send him a personalized, high-decibel recording of his own petulant complaints, in a loop. Albright's face went pale. The humiliation was, perhaps, a more effective punishment than any disciplinary action could have been. He stood there, speechless, as Xylo's bioluminescence calmed and he began purring contentedly again, now able to communicate clearly with Amelia once more. Amelia smiled. Some scientists use sophisticated instruments, some used intellect, but sometimes, a good old-fashioned bit of righteous fury was all you needed. And, secretly, she enjoyed the satisfaction of a job well done, even if it involved high-decibel recordings of a very embarrassed xenobiologist. The Xeno honeymoon, it seemed, was back on track, albeit with a significantly less jealous xenobiologist in the picture. Chapter 6: Pheromone Politics. The fallout from Albright's thwarted sabotage wasn't limited to the disgruntled xenobiologist. Xylo's potent pheromones, amplified by the earlier disruption, were now affecting the entire research station crew. The effects weren't quite as intense as they'd been during the peak of his mating cycle, but they were enough to cause a ripple effect of unexpected romantic entanglements and comical misunderstandings. Dr. Chen, usually a picture of stoic calm, was inexplicably drawn to the station's chief engineer, a gruff, bearded woman named Svetlana who'd previously dismissed him as a boring collection of spreadsheets. Svetlana, in turn, found herself inexplicably attracted to a surprisingly flirtatious maintenance drone, resulting in a hilariously awkward three-way flirtation involving oil spills, circuit diagrams, and a lot of very confused robotic beeps. The station cook, a cheerful but perpetually flustered man named Carlos, developed a sudden and overwhelming infatuation with a colony of genetically engineered, bioluminescent glowworms that he'd been tasked with cultivating. His attempts at wooing the glowworms involved serenading them with opera and decorating their terrarium with tiny, handcrafted miniature sombreros. Amelia, witnessing the widespread pheromone-induced chaos, found herself both amused and slightly concerned. The situation was certainly comical, but it also highlighted the potential complexities of interspecies relationships, particularly when those relationships involved powerful, unpredictable biological forces. This, Amelia said to Xylo, who was observing the chaos with a mixture of amusement and mild horror, is a unique sociological study. Xylo responded with a low purr and a series of clicks which roughly translated to, "Indeed. Your species' reactions to pheromonal influence are unexpectedly varied. And, I might add, quite entertaining." The most unexpected development, however, involved Amelia herself. She discovered that her own pheromones were interacting with Xylo's in a surprisingly complex way. While not as potent as Xylo's, her pheromones seemed to have a calming, balancing effect on his more intense urges. "Seems we have a symbiotic relationship on our hands," Xylo communicated, his fur glowing with a gentle, comforting blue. "Your pheromones, they help to modulate mine." A pleasant surprise. Amelia, feeling a blush creep up her neck, replied, "It's certainly something new." The thought of her own pheromones having a balancing effect on Xylo's was both intriguing and slightly embarrassing. The pheromone-induced chaos continued for several days, adding a layer of slapstick comedy to the already unusual circumstances of the mission. However, amidst the comical romantic entanglements and glowworm serenades, a deeper understanding began to emerge, an understanding of the surprising complexities of human emotions and the unexpected bonds that could form between two vastly different species. The situation, however chaotic, was bringing the research station crew closer together, in a way that even Dr. Albright's disruptive machinations couldn't entirely undo. And it certainly added a whole new dimension to Amelia and Xylo's burgeoning relationship. Chapter 7, A Planetary Proposal, of Sorts. The planetary alignment, the catalyst for Xylo's intense mating ritual, was nearing its peak. The atmosphere crackled with energy, both planetary and romantic. Xylo, having mostly recovered from Albright's sabotage, was preparing for what Amelia now understood to be the culmination of his mating ritual, a display of profound affection, a declaration of intent, a proposal of sorts. The display began at sunset. Xylo, bathed in the crimson light of Kepler 1.